and welcome to WriterLens. I am going to be talking about a terrific work today. Oh wait, hold on. Am I not visible? Just a minute. I may not be visible to you. What can I do here? Sorry about that. There I am. Hi! Sorry about that for those of you here on our Zoom call. Yes, today we are going to be talking about a terrific movie, very famous and very exciting to talk about, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings. Now, one of the reasons I picked this movie to talk about today is because, well, we are going to begin a fantasy class upcoming on Monday, Stories, Sorcery, and the Quest to Write Stronger Fantasy, which will be hosted by yours truly. I know, I'm so excited. So, I figured I would talk about perhaps the most famous fantasy film of all time. And just like the book back in the 1950s, this film, which came out in the early 2000s, really changed the game for film in terms of what studios might be willing to try, experiment with. A lot of them were scared of any of these, swords and sandals sort of stories. But without Lord of the Rings, we probably wouldn't have, Game of Thrones and a whole lot of other products. Maybe even a lot of the superhero films that Marvel has been enjoying so much. Who knows? It was quite a game changer. Now, when you think of the story structure, you might be wondering how I'm going to look at it because this is just one installment of a trilogy. And just for the record, I am looking at this as a film, not as the book. Obviously, there is similarities between the two, but I'm just going to be discussing the movie. So any difference between the movie and the book, that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just the film as a work on its own, almost pretending like the book doesn't exist. Um, for the purposes of for the story, even though this is a three-part story and it's going to be this huge epic journey that the audience is going to go on, you also can see that within each individual chapter is also a story structure of a 7-point story structure and a fulfilling arc in of itself, which is something that's important to do. Often I see writers, especially early writers, and they have been just so used to seeing series. That's what they consume, especially if they're fantasy writers. The series are very popular, and so they just think in terms of a series. But then what they'll end up doing is like, well, at the end of the first book, the protagonist gets to this mountain, and in the second book, they climb the mountain. In the third book, they reach the pinnacle of the mountain, which is the big four, and they forget about the fact that along the way, each of these individual installments need to have a story of their own, a hero arc of their own, if you really want it to be successful. And I feel like Peter Jackson was able to do that with this movie. And you can say, well, he owes a lot to Tolkien, fair enough. But I'm specifically referring to the movie script. So the movie script begins with Frodo living a relatively peaceful life, right? He's there in Hobbiton, chilling, relaxed. You do get the sense that perhaps he would like something interesting to happen. Maybe it's a bit boring. So it's like one of those be careful what you wish for, right? Because he would like it to be a little more exciting, but yeah, well, when it's more exciting, it's more exciting. The question that gets presented to the audience is kind of, what's up with this ring? Like, his father gives him this ring, and he disappeared from the party, and Gandalf's really creepy about it, and it's like, what's up with this? And really, it gets even to more up with what's up with the ring, but it's like, is Frodo going to kind of amount to anything? Is he going to go on a great adventure like his father? His father leaves, and he's kind of stuck there, and it's like, well, am I ever going to get out of this place? You kind of have that going on as well. Now, the decision is that Frodo decides to start on his journey to destroy the ring. And you might be saying, well, does he really have a choice? I mean, come on. Gandalf says he can't do it, and Frodo's basically the only person around. True, but you'll notice, and we'll look at it as we go through the script, just how proactive Frodo is about it. It isn't just sprung upon him. Frodo is very much on board. He's enabled. He's active. He's wanting to help. You do get a sense of responsibility rather than it's like no choice in the matter. Even though, it is very much handed to him, and he's kind of stuck with it, but still he is a willing participant, which makes a big difference. Of course, we have the big fun and games, which is the big core of the movie: chasing, action, adventure. You know, everybody wants the ring, and there's hideouts, and there's elves, and there's just action and excitement and set pieces and just so much stuff, right? And then we finally get to the pit where Frodo is kind of all by himself because Gandalf was taken to the pit by the Balrog, and Gadriel informs Frodo he's going to end up completely alone, and Boromir is trying to get the ring, and so it's like everything is just disintegrating around Frodo. It's not like one major point exactly, but it's just like it slowly gets worse and worse and worse, and that rope just tightens around him to the point where he's really going to have to come to grips with what it means to be a ring bearer, really fully accept the job, and then do it anyway. Which is his climbing out. He decides to leave and go on his own. Now, you'll notice this is a reflection from that beginning when his father, just kind of abandons him in town. Now he is kind of going and becoming that adult, and he is leaving and going on his own. And in the New World, he now understands the specific quest he's on, and he has the assistance of his friend Sam. So it's not a super major arc in terms of the change from the beginning to the end, because we've got a ways to go. He's just one step of 3 on his hero journey, right? But you still see that step. You see that change. He starts out kind of naive, innocent, and then he's moved up. He's gotten more. He's had the death of more or less the death of not the death of his father, but his father is dying, right? And then you have Gandalf who's dead as far as he knows, and a lot of other people that he might have thought of as heroic are showing their true colors and just how dark they are on the inside. So he really is going through this, from juvenile to adult sort of journey. How when you're a kid, you often think very highly of your guardians or the moral figures in your society, and then you realize kind of the sad truth behind them, that they struggle just like everybody else, and that's really what this first chapter is about. Now, there would probably be a lot of debate about this, and if you want to debate me, feel free to go ahead and talk about this in the chat. Yes, tell me how I'm wrong if you think I am, because this is rather subjective. But this is how I divvy up the characters based on, again, how the movie presents them. So you have Frodo as the protagonist. The antagonist is Sauron, but really he's represented, because he's just like an eyeball in the middle of nowhere. He's represented by the ring wraiths and Saruman, who represent, his forces trying to get to the ring. The distraction character, of course, is the ring itself, which is very human-like in this script. They talk about it as if it has a conscience, as if it's an alive entity. The relationship characters, you have Gandalf, of course, at the beginning. He really is the one that's setting the tone, setting the rules, explaining to Frodo, but then he dies, so they're kind of stuck. Who's going to do that next? And you have Galadriel, who kind of steps in to fill in the gaps towards the end there. And she explains to Frodo, yeah, you're going to be by yourself, which we'll get to. Support character, you have Sam. Sam is just one of the best support characters you could possibly see in a movie trilogy. He is terrific because he is so supportive, and yet he doesn't just feel like a shallow, two-dimensional cheerleader. You really love his devotion to Frodo, and he's such a likable person, but yet there are those moments where he gets mad, and there are those moments he gets upset, and he's not flat, but he is ultimately just so supportive. And I mean, at the end of this movie, he ends up practically drowning himself in support. Like, it's just such a beautiful thing, and it shows you where you can take that support character, especially if you're working in this sort of mythology realm like Lord of the Rings, and you're dealing with archetypes and big characters. Opposition character, You have Boromir, who is like this is never gonna happen. What's going on? You can't just walk into Mordor, right? that meme. And he is the one that's kind of poo-pooing the whole thing and ends up almost trying to steal the ring for himself. Gimli is the one that tends to have the emotional reaction. He just comes in with that axe. He's gonna chop the ring up and things like that. And then you have Aragorn, who's really kind of the reason character. He's kind of plotting almost like a military general what it is the best strategy to do. And you'll notice somebody missing in here. Yes, where is Legolas? I almost forgot his name. Yeah, he has 20 lines in the script and they don't really do much. Honestly, I'm not sure if Peter Jackson would have included him if he didn't have to, because he's just such a popular character from the book. But in the movie, in this one especially, it's like, yeah, he doesn't do a whole lot. But I mean, I'm not saying that he should have cut him. I'm just saying mechanically, not a lot. Merry and Pippin, you'll notice I don't have in there either. There are support characters that are just really bad at it, right? They're along for the ride and they end up doing a lot of problems that get them into trouble. If I and at risk of criticizing something that is a masterpiece, I'm not the biggest fan of that. Certainly not to emulate that. Um, I don't tend to like it when the consequences that affect the protagonist are kind of a accident because of a fool. Now, granted, they will have their own little journey. By the third, they have the whole fool triumphant arc, which is nice, but I don't know. It's not my favorite aspect of this movie, I will tell you. Even though they're fun characters, because comic relief is nice to have. So anyway, the movie begins with Galadriel doing this prologue. Now, this is an interesting change from the book. This is one thing I'm going to mention, comparing the books, is that the book does not begin with a prologue, and yet the movie does. Weird, right? Because usually you have the opposite situation. But Peter Jackson, I believe, really just wanted to make it clear to the audience what's going on, what are the rules, what's happening, partly because the movie is going to have a slow start. It's going to start in Hobbiton, and not a lot's going to happen, and you're going to be like, well, this isn't all that epic. So he kind of does a Star Wars here. Instead of an opening crawl, though, he does this long prologue. This is a reason why prologues can work. Is because you just have to get information to the audience, and you in order for them to be interested in the beginning, because especially when the beginning is the typical day, which is the way that the Peter Jackson film begins. Typical day for Bilbo, just milling about, and Frodo, nothing too exciting. To show you the contrast, and that's not a bad thing to do. It's just when your typical day is kind of you run the risk of boring your audience before you get to the exciting part. And so sometimes when you do that, you need that first scene to set up the threat. And so that would be the antagonist approaches sort of threat. Now, this goes even further than that because it gives you backstory. But one thing that it's able to do, because it's a movie, is it shows it to you, right? So it begins with this epic fight scene, and there's violence and carnage, and so it's very interesting. If this was just written on the page, I don't know if it would work as well. It would be challenged. You'd really have to get people down into the trenches for that big action sequence. And perhaps, I know there are works that begin like that, and they work okay. But just so you know, because you'll often hear, never do a prologue, never, never, never. And I would say, even if you do this, just make this your first scene. Don't call it a prologue, or people will just skip it. But the reason to do a first scene that is a little bit of setup before you get to your protagonist is because you want to show that antagonist approaching, so they're excited about it. Now, this is where you get that personification of the ring, right? It abandoned Golem, and something happened that the ring did not intend. The ring is thinking, and that makes it much more interesting and creepy. Now, you have Gandalf's wonderful introduction here, this classic line, "A wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to," right? I love it. And it just gets so much character out all at once, and is a fun line also. And here you have some nods to not only The Hobbit, which was the first story. This was written as a sequel, although the movie is not. So what the movie does is it lets you know about Bilbo's adventures. It's a little bit of backstory. The fun thing about doing this little info dump is the way that it also gives you an insight to Gandalf, and it's a joke at the same time. 3 things at once. If you can do that, you can get away with exposition. If you're not only sharing information, but you're revealing character and you're making people laugh, you'll probably get away with it most of the time. Just keep that in mind. And here you have Bilbo at the party, giving his big story about the trolls arguing over him all night long. And then we have the scene where he uses the ring, and then he is approached by Gandalf about, I don't know, like, rings. Kind of weird. What you doing with a weird ring? And and Bilbo gets a little bit creepy about it. It's my own, my precious. And Gandalf's like, precious? It's been called that before, but not by you. And now he's triggered. And so the mystery does begin pretty quickly. It doesn't take too long before you start to get that. However, because of that prologue, we already know that the ring is bad news. We already know the ring is a huge deal, that it's like the most important thing in the universe, which, it helps. It helps you as an audience member to be invested in this scene. And then Frodo comes back after Bilbo leaves, and I'm sorry, Gandalf comes back after Bilbo leaves, and he is, talking about the ring, and, uh, I need to go, and questions, and keep it secret, keep it safe, lots of classic lines in this. And then he comes back, and I love the way that they set this up, where he says, there are few who can read what it says. The language is that of Mordor, which I will not utter here. And I always love it in languages where it's like, it's so bad, I can't even say it, right? It's very operatic, but it works. It just gives you so much fear. And the way that the film like shows the ring and it just gets sucked to the ground, it's like, and the fact that you have to light it on fire to see that inscription, it's just so sinister. It's great. It's great. There's a reason why this is a classic. And he starts, reading what it says, that this is that ring that's going to control everything. It is the ultimate power. And you know what they say about ultimate power, right? Ultimate power corrupts, or absolute power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So that's essentially a big theme of this story is even a good person can be corrupted by a great deal of power. So here we get quite a lot of info dumping going on, but it's not too bad. He is, of course, it's like not too bad. This is a masterpiece, but it's not too difficult to go through this. It's still pretty quick to the point. Soren only needs the ring. He's seeking it. The ring returns to go back to the master. So it's like not only is there somebody evil after this object, but the object itself is evil and wants to go back to the evil person. Like it's just like everything is against you. And so Frodo immediately, like I said, he's very active. He's like, put it away, keep it in. We'll never speak of it again. Immediately he wants to solve the problem. And Gandalf's like, no, that's not going to work because I know where it is. And then Frodo's like, no, you take it. And then Gandalf says, nope, I can't do it, which is so interesting, right? It's such an interesting choice because it limits that guardian character in a way that I think is quite sophisticated, that to me makes it stand out from something like even like Star Wars or something in terms of character complexity, which I mean a lot of people like. Of course, Tolkien is stronger than George Lucas, but yeah, I gotcha. But this is one of the reasons why, is because, Gandalf is shaded in that way where he is so powerful and his magic is never fully understood by the audience. I mean, I know there's the Tolkienites that really go into it and they can maybe give more of an explanation, but on a quick read, you're not really going to understand Gandalf's magic. It is too fantastical for you to really understand. He exists on this higher plane, and yet the ring is too much for him. Like even that guy is scared of the ring. So it just does such a great job of making it a big looming force. So then Frodo simply says, what must I do? Again, he's very active, right? He is just willing to accept his fate, and he, goes for it. And Gandalf even makes the point, it's like, wow, what magnificent creatures hobbits are. And Gandalf does his little speech about, being worried. There's so many things that could bother you. The birds, the beasts, like, the world's against you, buddy. Yeah. Yeah, the enemy pretty much controls, I don't know, all of Middle Earth. So good luck. Have a nice time. And oh yeah, and by the way, the ring is trying to get back to him too. So not only is everything trying to hunt the ring down, but the ring also wants Soren to find it. So yeah, quite big stakes. And that's an interesting thing about the work as well, is those are large stakes for, I don't know, like, what are we, a third of the, not even a third of the way into the movie, and it's like, whoa, you just dialed that up to 11, where are you going to go from there? And that's where the way that the ring manipulates the user is so great, because that puts that ticking clock, right? And so now, and it's a ticking clock of Soren trying to find it, and an option lock in terms of there's less and less ways to get there, and then there's the ticking clock of Frodo. It's like, well, over time he's going to turn into Gollum, or he's going to get co-opted by the ring, and yeah, we better hurry this along. So it's just so tense, and it just gets, it gets, closes it in on you, closes in on you. It's so well done. It's, again, one reason why it's a classic. So you get to Saruman, and you have the big reveal that Saruman is on the side of Sauron. As much as I should not criticize Tolkien for his naming, I wouldn't recommend naming two characters so similarly. I can tell you, the first time I saw this film as a teenager, I was like, wait, Sauron? Wait, who's what? Yeah. Um, often agents will tell you not even to name characters with the same first letter, let alone that much of a similar sound. But that Tolkien likes to do that, and I think that is realistic. It's just harder to read, but maybe more sophisticated. So you have Strider or Aragorn coming in, and he's like, he's kind of that Han Solo type a little bit, but he doesn't really play the opposition role, in my opinion. He's too supportive for that. Like I said, I think of him more as the planner, the reason character. He's a little bit snarky, but he doesn't really play that, I don't think we're gonna be able to pull it off sort of thing. He's more of the, this is the way we should do things, and let's go this way, and let's do that. That's more his role in the story. I do love, though, where he says, "Are you frightened?" And Frodo says, "No." Yeah, yes. And Strider says, "Not nearly frightened enough." And it's like, seriously, we already dialed this story to an 11. He says the birds and the whatever were at. Like, how scared does Frodo need to be? Like, wow, tense, tense, tense. I will say, the story is quite operatic, and if there is a complaint that somebody could make about it, is that it could be toned down a bit, um, which would make it a very different sort of story. It would have less of that mythological feel, less of that grandiose feel, but perhaps that's something for you to consider when you're writing your own story. You may want to avoid quite this operatic of a level, because it's harder to pull off than you think. It's challenging. This does it well, but it's not, like I said, not necessarily something to emulate. It's like a do as I say, not as I do. So yeah, we have Merry and Pippin putting on the dish, and it causes the big stir. And this is actually what is going to cause Frodo to get stabbed by the blade that's essentially going to kill him. And all for tomato sausages and crispy bacon. Now, like I said, that's not my favorite thing as an author, as a choice. Is it realistic? Sure. Perhaps there's somebody that could give me a really great literary interpretation as to why it's so meaningful or powerful. For me, it's not my favorite. I wouldn't recommend copying that. Try to give the reason why there's a fatal situation for a character a little bit more of their own responsibility, or I think you might run the risk of turning off your audience. I'm just saying. Um, Although you could be like, well, he got away with it. Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm just saying. I'm just worried. So, no, so Frodo gets stabbed, and this is kind of an interesting thing to do to the character so early, right? This near-death experience. Again, it's like you're dialing this up to 11. Where are you going to go from here? But you have that ticking clock of the ring, so it is okay. You can put his physical life in jeopardy, and that's still not going to be the most severe thing that you're going to do. What's the most severe thing you can do to somebody is you can mess with their soul, right? Their personality, their innermost being, and that's what the story is going to be about. So this is just something to keep in mind with your own works. If you have a really if you're worried because you want to start your story with some really high stakes scene, and you're like, well, if I go there, I don't know where to go next. Remember, you can go personal, and you can talk about things like your innermost being, your soul, your sanity, all kinds of other ways to ratchet up tension. And they end up in Rivendell, where Frodo ends up being healed. And again, you have a limitation from Gandalf here, where he makes the point of it's like by the skills of Lord Elrond, you're beginning to mend. So again, you have a sense of a limitation of Gandalf. We're not quite sure where his limitations are, but the script goes out of its way to mention at least a few of them. He is not invincible. He can't just fix everything, which helps with the stakes of the story, because he is quite powerful. And if we really thought he could do anything, then it's like, well, this is not that severe of a situation. Gandalf will just wave his magic wand and everything will be okay. But it's clear that there are limits to his magic, limits to his abilities, even if we're not clear exactly what those are. So now Frodo is talking to Bilbo, and they're kind of having this moment where Bilbo is talking about his adventures, and then Frodo's like, well, I wish that I spent my childhood wishing I was going off on my adventures, but my adventure turned out to be quite different. I'm not like you. So it's like, I thought I kind of wanted to walk in my father's footsteps and go on some grandiose adventure, and now I kind of hate it. I kind of want to just be at home making tea. um, which is cool. It's great, especially because he's not very far in his adventure. So now that we know that he's hating this, it's not like he's really enjoying it. Well, now we're just really putting the pain on the protagonist, which is a great thing to do. Tension. So now we have the big council scene, right, where we're talking about what to do with this ring, and it's like everybody's playing it like it's a hot potato. And we get to the redemption story being started up for mankind, and Gandalf's like, it is men which we place our hopes, and Elrond says, men are weak. It's because of the men that the ring survives. I was there 3,000 years ago. And remember, we had already seen this scene because he set that up, but the fact that we had seen the scene before doesn't make this like super repetitive. It's fine. It's not very long, but it did set up that conflict for the ring. But the other option that Peter Jackson could have gone with is, well, you don't find out until now, which would have changed the story. And you can decide what you think was the better choice. So here you have Boromir being that opposition character. Gondor has no king. He's just in the way. Doesn't like anything. He's poo-pooing everything. And Gimli is like, well, what are we waiting for? And he gets his axe. He's like, because he's going to give that emotional response, right? And no, that doesn't work either. But at least it shows the audience that you can't just chop it up, just in case you were wondering. If the audience wondered, hey, why don't they just cut it? No, you can't do that. Although you probably could have guessed that. And there's that classic line from Boromir. One does not simply walk into Mordor. Yeah. Which we've all seen on Facebook in a million different iterations. But it really is that classic opposition character line. You can't do this. What are you thinking? This is way too dangerous. What? And it establishes the high stakes, how bad it is. I mean, he just goes on. There is evil there that does not sleep. It is a barren wasteland. The very air you breathe is poison. Not even 10,000 men could you, like, he just keeps going on, and you're like, wow. But it's very, it's effective to raise those stakes and make it so important. Especially because not only is Frodo going to have to do it, he's going to have to do it more or less by himself. He's going to have Sam, but that's about it. I mean, Gollum is really of no help whatsoever. So now you get the scene where Bilbo, you get to see his own father has been corrupted by the ring, which is, it's just so sad, and it's so personal when he says, I want to hold the ring one last time, and he goes, and he goes after it. And just the fact that that evil affects even your own family, again, that's really like this first story, is that coming to grips with the evil that exists within everyone, and losing that naive idea that people are quite the heroes you think they are, but they all have these dark shadows within them, and you have a dark shadow within you, and you have to fight against it. And guess what? It's starting right, that as soon as you kind of acknowledge that, you start to become aware of it, and to some degree, it almost can make it worse. It can almost make it harder to avoid things because now it's on your mind, So now we get to them going over the mountain, and Saruman is messing with them and creating all this weather, and they're fighting over which ways to go, and Boromir's of course being all, well, let's get out, we gotta do this. It's like, what's gonna happen? Everything's going bad. Um, and Gimli suggests going into the mines of Moria, which kind of an emotional response. It's just based on the fact that he knows it well. There's dwarfs there, so it's just kind of a personal decision. It ends up being a pretty bad decision. Gandalf now gives his little relationship character moment. You feel its power too. I felt it too. You must be careful now. Evil will be drawn to you from outside the fellowship, and I fear from within. And then Frodo says, who do I trust? And Gandalf says, you must trust yourself. Trust your own strength. So it's like, trust no one. It's like, what the X-Files? Frodo, what do you mean? Gandalf, there are many powers in this world for good or for evil. Some are greater than I am, and against some I have not been tested. Again, we're talking about Gandalf's limitations. He spends a lot of time talking about what he can't do, which, considering all the things he can do, all the things that he's able to do, makes him much more rounded, much more interesting. It also gives a lot more weight to the situation. It also empowers Frodo in a way, because it gives you this sense that, Frodo's going to have to face things that would be even a challenge for Gandalf. So it's going to give Frodo that big, epic hero journey, considering this, high level place where Gandalf starts, and yet Frodo may even be able to surpass that with some of the things that he's going to have to take on. Really, really cool. All right, so Frodo here ends up solving this little riddle, which gets them into the mines. It's a riddle. Speak word, friend, and enter. What's the Elvish word for friend? And he figures it out. So that's kind of a cool way for him to contribute. He's a little guy. He doesn't have a lot of particular skill, but he's kind of clever, and so that's a nice addition that gives him some agency, some ability, which makes him more appealing to the audience. It also does make sense with the riddle if you know the story of the Hobbit, because his father was pretty good with riddles. So if you have that knowledge, it makes sense. It doesn't seem to come from left field. So we have another interesting scene where Gandalf does a little bit of relationship characterizing, and he's giving you the information about Smeagol becoming Gollum, and Frodo says, it's a pity Bilbo didn't kill him when he had the chance, and Gandalf said, pity? It was a pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserves life. Can you give it to them, Frodo? And that's a pretty profound statement, and something for him to think about, and something for the audience to think about. And again, it's nice to have these relationship characters to give these little speeches. They're why, well, not the only reason why, but they're a good reason to include them in your story. Certainly you should have one, but don't forget you have one for moments like this where you want to do that kind of philosophizing. They're good at that. There's more to this hobbit than meets the eye. Again, kind of that philosophizing. But here you have kind of a growth, because in the first time that Frodo gets stabbed, it's like he goes to Rivendell and he's like going to basically die. This time, well, he's empowered because his father gave him that mithril, which is like a bulletproof vest essentially, and he uses it. The spear doesn't cut him, and he has grown. Now he's grown because of something he acquired, but he acquired it from his father, so you have that nice relationship connection, which makes it meaningful to the audience. And it gives him a sense of growth as a character. He's getting better. So now we have a Balrog, a demon of the ancient world. This foe is beyond all of you, or beyond any of you. It's like, yep, dum dum dum. It's even beyond Gandalf, apparently, because Gandalf kind of gets sucked in. Although, spoiler alert, he comes back. But you may not necessarily know that, especially the first time you see the story, because they've set up so well that Gandalf has these limitations that you're not really sure. What's going to happen? Now, granted, if you know mythology, you probably might guess, he'll probably come back in some form. But they do a good job of making you not quite sure about that. And that's great for the ending of the story, because it gives Frodo that isolation. If you were pretty sure he was going to come back, or weren't at all wondering if he would, well, that wouldn't make Frodo's isolation all that scary. So Galadriel shows him the future Frodo is what will come to pass if you should fail, and he sees this horrific thing, which of course is a great way to clue into the audience, the risk, the challenge, the stakes, because he sees his hometown getting destroyed by the most evil force of the world. And so it's like, well, if you don't accomplish it, it's all going to go down the tube. So you better get it done. And even then, it goes further because she says the fellowship is breaking. It already has begun. He will try to take the ring. You know of whom I speak. One by one, it will destroy them all. Now, what's interesting is Frodo here does offer Galadriel the ring. He says, if you ask it of me, I will give you the ring. Which you could say, well, does that kind of make him kind of weak because he just kind of wants to give up on the task? But I don't think that's what it is. I think he's just being smart. He doesn't know that this person is uh, not going to be able to handle it. And again, it does speak to that. It does speak a little bit to a naivety. This is the second time. This is essentially a fail cycle, as he fails when he tries to give it to Gandalf. He fails when he tries to give it to Galadriel. By the third time, when you get to Boromir, and Boromir really wants it, he's not even going to be tempted. He's figured it out. So it is a bit of a try-fail cycle. So I would say it's only 2 times in, so that it doesn't make him seem all that weak that he would make the same mistake twice. And again, what it shows you is that motif of the hero, the person you really look up to, that wonderful force of morality is kind of messed up on the inside. Even though Galadriel does, pass the test, because she does not accept the ring because she knows that it would corrupt her too much. So in that sense, you can still respect Galadriel as a moralistic character, and that's where it's a really interesting, nuanced point that is quite sophisticated. And again, I think one of the reasons why this is classic. Frodo says, "I cannot do this alone," and Galadriel says, "You are a ring bearer, Frodo. To bear a ring of power is to be alone." And again, this is something that really makes Frodo such a powerful protagonist and very relatable, because a lot of people can relate to isolation. They can certainly relate to loneliness. They've had times in their life that they felt very lonely, or often feel like they're out on a limb on all different kinds of things, in their life and their work. It's just it's a very common human trait to feel alone and feel this sense of burden, especially based on knowledge, right? If you feel like you're really passionate about something or some truth, you can feel so alone, because you could be like, well, why doesn't everybody else get this? Why am I the only person who understands this? I'm so by myself. And it's great. It's a great story. Great story. And I'm just sharing love on Tolkien, but or Peter Jackson, or both. All right, so Sam here again showing what a great support character he is. Have some food. You haven't eaten all day. You're not sleeping. Don't think I haven't noticed. And Frodo's like, I'm all right. And he says, but you're not. I'm here to help you. I promised Gandalf that I would. He's just so likable. I love Sam so much. He's that friend you want so bad. Although I do have friends that are very much like that, and they have helped me so much in my life. And so I really relate to stories about powerful friendship, because I'd nothing without some of my friends. I'll be perfectly frank. All right, I'm gonna start crying. All right, so anyway, we're getting to Boromir. Boromir is that big bad character, opposition character, and he doesn't get a redemption arc. He's not a Han Solo type of opposition character where he comes around the end exactly. He just stays opposition all the way to the end, and he's just in the way. And it's he's bad mouthing their plans and trying to get the ring. It's terrible. And he just keeps going on and on and on until finally, where he's like, "You will even betray the ring to Sauron. You'll betray us. You'll go to your death. Curse you." Blah blah blah. Just terrible. And then finally he comes to his senses, and he's like, he feels very sorry about himself. So in a sense, he gets that redemption, right? Because he goes so off the cliff, and then he comes back. So I guess I'll take that back. He does get a bit of redemption, but not for Frodo to see. In Frodo's story, he just goes off the cliff, and then Frodo has to abandon everybody, and then that's that. And I mean, it's not a shock that Boromir is killed off because it's kind of like the price he must pay for just being so mean to the protagonist and so unhelpful. And let's be honest, where would that character go at that point? You've taken them to the full level of, that kind of arc, that opposition, and then it's like, what are they going to do? Just continue to be like, I don't think we're going to build post up, and you might be wondering, well, does that mean there's no more opposition characters? Well, if I ever do the other two movies, you'll see how the characters kind of pivot around. They switch. I'm just speaking of in the first film. So Aragorn says, "I swear to protect you," and Frodo's like, "Can you protect me from yourself?" And Aragorn basically says, "Yep, I could do it. I would have gone with you to the very end, to the very fires of Mordor." And Frodo says, "I know," which is kind of interesting because essentially, I guess he knows that he would say that, but the implication really is that as much as Aragorn wants to say that, I'm not so sure that he would have been able to do that, because that's certainly not the impression you get from Galadriel or Gandalf. You get the impression that it was only a matter of time before even he would get corrupted, but I don't know. So we get to the very end where Sam, I'm sure now there's going to be Aragorn fans being like, what are you saying? You could have done it. Okay, fine. All right, I'm just saying. Sam jumps into the river and he can't even swim. Like, how beautiful is that? And operatic and just like just such a great archetype, right? Of the beloved friend that just does anything for you. He's gonna dive in. He can't even swim, and it's for nothing but moral support. Really, I mean, that's all he. That's all he really can give him exactly. I mean, Sam's not particularly talented anyway. He doesn't have any specific knowledge. It's just moral support. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and it's such a great climax to this, where you can see where Frodo has had like all of these illusions shattered about people and or elves and wizards, and how inside they have this sinister nature, but yet the fact that Sam is so pure and so beautiful as a character, it does help shade that, right? And it also I don't know. It's just I'm just going on about Sam. And I do think that you see this encouragement again. Frodo's like, I don't suppose we'll ever see them again, which pretty nihilistic, but Frodo's already, you can see, is on that level. It's like, yeah, this is probably like a dead-end mission, like as in we're dying. And Sam's like, we may yet, Mr. Frodo, we may. And then Frodo just says, I'm glad you're with me. And it's like, oh, my heart. So beautiful. I love it. All right, so that is The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. So hopefully you enjoyed my musings and my gushings about it. I am a very big fan of this work. It is a beautiful script. It is a classic for a lot of great reasons. And there's a lot of great character work, particularly to study. Not that there's anything wrong with the plot, but I would say the plot is one of the more ordinary things about the story. It's not that abnormal to have some sort of quest involving a lot of different set pieces to get to some sort of big sinister ending, but it's the specific stakes about it, the fact that you have the object that's corrupting you at the same time as it's leading you to the great villain who's coming your way, and just that wonderful tension piece, and the specific characters, the characters and the themes are really, to me, what sets the work apart and why it's become such a classic. All right, so that has been WriterLens. WriterLens is going to be on next week at 3 p.m. So you can check that out here on the YouTube channel, or you can check it out if you're an AutoCrit member through the community there. On Sunday, we will be doing the Story Doctor, and that is with me, and I will be answering any story questions you have. Like perhaps you have world building disease because, yeah, you're kind of want to be like Tolkien, and so you want to take 20 years to write a story. Not necessarily the best strategy. Or maybe you have tell-itis, where you always talk about the way people feel instead of showing how they feel. Or maybe you have a sagging plot line. You know, the middle of your book just sits there and nothing really happens because you don't know what to do with the setup to the finale. Well, if you have any of those problems or other problems, or you don't even know what your problem is, you just know something's broken, you can call me up, or you can get on the Zoom call. You can go to autocrit.com/live, find the link, or you can join us on YouTube, and that will be at noon on Sunday. So, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed our discussion here on WriterLens, and I will see you around, okay? Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.